I was just going to say, I watched this debate. Well, I haven't watched the whole debate, but I watched some of the debate between William Lane Craig, one of the foremost apologists of our day, against James White, and it was had to do with Calvinism versus Molinism regarding the free will. And William Lane Craig defends some sort of freedom of man as opposed to the Calvinist view of James White. And obviously, the Calvinist view have a perspective on it that differs from us in the Lutheran view. And I was wondering if you could elucidate that for us.
Well, the simplest way is to just talk about double predestination. That there are those who, before eternity, have been consigned to salvation, and those who have been consigned to damnation. And to put it baldly and bluntly, there's nothing you can do about it. I don't want to get into the heavy water of election here, because this is really not what I want to talk about today. But you can see from way you're describing this, Steve, and I think you're raising a good point here in terms of how we want to approach theology. This is the kind of stuff that Calvinists always get themselves tied up in. They've got to have an answer for everything. And so they're going to debate anybody and everybody. They're going to apologize and defend. How many angels can stand on the head of a pin? They're going to be into all these questions, theological questions. And in the meantime, life is going on. Okay, life is going on. People are living in the midst of sin, death, and the power of the devil. And I don't need another lecture on theology. And that's not what I do. Hopefully you understand that, folks. I'm not trying to lecture on theology. I'm trying to give Christ to people who are in the midst of the struggle, like I am. So, the only reason I want to even get drawn into any conversations about election or free will is not because I want to try to prove my point, but because I want to try to show what I believe Scripture lays out, and that is that the only will worth talking about that matters is God's. And so the question is, what is God's will for you? That's really the matter that Lutherans take up. What is God's will for you? Sinner, locked and bound in sin and headed for the graveyard.
The Lutherans, we take the view that what God's revealed will states is sufficient for us.
That's right.
We don't need to be looking for the hidden God. We don't need to try to unclothe God and see him naked.
And we're not going to either. Yeah.
Right.
He keeps hiding. The faster you chase God, the faster he disappears over the horizon. That's just how he works. And he's going to show himself where he will. So that's you raise a good point there. And it does kind of go to this issue of what is it, what are we really about here? And of course, Luther was certainly making that case with Erasmus is, look, we're not interested here in getting sucked into these questions that don't really have any serious answers that we can rely upon. Luther was interested in assertions. And this is something, of course, that Erasmus really disliked about Luther's theology. He recognized that in his writings that Luther was being very assertive about Christ, about forgiveness, about the gospel, about assurance, and that sort of, and all of that. And Erasmus, he had real problems with that, partially for the reasons I stated earlier, that he, as a good intellectual, right, a good skeptic, everything is ambiguous, right? That's sort of the academic milieu. There's no clear cut, unless you're in the sciences, the hard sciences, in engineering, where you actually can't have too much ambiguity or things don't work too well. When you get into the humanities and philosophy, and the liberal arts and so forth, well, everything is gray, right? Everything is up in the air. Nothing is really settled. It could be this, could be that. And Luther said that is not the way to do theology. It's not the way to read Scripture. We talked about that before in another class about how one of those principles, how the clear interprets the unclear in Scripture. This is Luther's approach, that there are uncertain or unclear passages in Scripture, but you don't use those to muddy up what's clear. You use the clear ones to help understand the ones that aren't so clear. And so when Luther started doing this, when he read Scripture, he began to come much closer to understanding what this was all about. And finally, it broke through to him. The gospel actually broke through to him.